Hello there and welcome to Times Exclusive. My name is Elvis Sohoa. This is a program in which we chat with a variety of personalities, discuss issues of national importance. And today we're speaking to Dr. Sunduzwayo Madise. He's a law lecturer at the University of Malawi, the Chancellor College. We're talking the recent case whereby the Constitutional Court in Longo declared the presidential election case null and void. Stay with us.
I love brilliant green on my walls. I love signal red, sweet lime, electric blue. I just love golden yellow.
You get all that and more at Rainbow Paints. Imagine a water-based paint that is water-resistant. Imagine a paint that is absolutely washable to remove dirt. And it guarantees you 10,000 cleaning scrubs over its lifespan without losing its luster. There can only be one paint that does just that, and that paint is acrylic sheen. Get yours today at all leading hardware stores. Rainbow Paints. Peace of mind. Part of the deal.
Dr. Madise, a very good evening and welcome to Times Exclusive.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're here basically to talk about the presidential elections case. Most Malawians, a majority of Malawians, know that a judgment was passed on Monday, the 3rd of February. The court declared that the presidential election should be held again because there were so many irregularities. First of all, what's your reaction to that particular judgment as a law lecturer?
Okay, as a law lecturer, the first thing is that to us is food for the lecture room, because it has given us a lot of material which we can use for teaching. So here we're talking about many classes for constitutional law, administrative law, jurisprudence, and also how to litigate. So issues of evidence and issues of advocacy. So it has given us food for thought. It has given us also a lot of substance that we can use. But it's also exciting. It's exciting because it has cleared some of the I would call the dark areas of law which we have had for some time.
Which are?
So, for example, the one that is in people are talking about the 50% plus one, and this comes from the fact that in 1994, after the first general election that we had in multi-party elections, Mr. Gwanda Chakwamba challenged the election of President-elect Bakiri Molozi on the basis that he did not get a majority. And Mr. Chakwamba's argument was that majority meant that you must get 50% plus one. When the matter went to court, the court interpreted it that no, majority does not mean 50% plus one, but majority simply means the one who is ahead, or who has greater votes than the others. And the court also used the term of first past the post, whereby if you have a post, the one who has passed it first is the one who's declared the winner.
So it doesn't matter the percentage, whether it's 20%.
It doesn't matter. So if you are, let's say theoretically you have 15 contestants, you could have a president with 10%.
Yeah.
So that's what it said. That judgment has been a little contentious, I should say, yeah, especially amongst the academic and literary world, because it really did. So in effect, the court gave what I would call a new interpretation to the term majority, because majority, as we know it, it means they must be greater than the others collected. So when you say majority vote, it cannot also be a minority vote. So that was the issue, and it did raise a lot of discussion, but it was accepted as the law that had been said by the court. And until now, when the court has now said majority means actually 50% plus one.
Historically, how important is this for Malawi? We have seen such cases being heard or tried in other parts of the country, or in other parts of Africa, I must say. Kenya was one of them, where the court also annulled the results of the presidential election there. But historically for Malawi, how important do you think this is?
Oh, this is gigantic. This is momentous. This is history making, not just for Malawi. And I think in terms of this case, it will reverberate much more than the Kenyan case. Look at the time it took. It's almost 9 months to the day. Look at the time it took. Look at the hours that were spent in court. That's unprecedented. So if you look at the Kenyan scenario, the decision was made quite fairly quickly, and it wasn't as huge as this. This, I can assure you, is huge, and historically it has changed the landscape forever. It has changed the landscape forever because it has now given a new meaning to certain words, and you must also understand that judgment did not just make a definition of the term majority, but it also went in to nullify the election, looking at the irregularities or the serious irregularities that had occurred during the election. So in my view, I think this is momentous and it's huge, and also because it does send a message that the courts will nullify anything if they think that it has not been properly done. And it was interesting that the court cited Section 12 of the Constitution, which essentially says that all power, especially elected power in Malawi, comes from the people.
Okay.
It must come from the people. And if the court will be of the view that the election is not reflective of the will of the people, in the sense that something has gone wrong, then the courts are prepared to strike down that election and nullify it. So to us, that is huge.
Let's talk about the highlights of that particular case. Most people followed it keenly, but what do you think were the most exciting, significant moments of that trial?
I think in terms of the whole trial, it was the way the court was exceedingly patient. Normally courts are not that patient. They were exceedingly patient to allow all this evidence to come. Also, normally in petitions, you usually deal with it with affidavit evidence. So this is the evidence that people swear and present. And normally the courts will look at it and make a decision. They may allow one or two cross-examination. But in this particular case, the court allowed the parties to cross-examine the deponents or the people who had sworn the affidavits. But also the court, I think, went out of its way to allow certain things that ordinarily courts would not allow. And I think there was a reason the courts did that, because the court realized that Malawians were listening to the proceedings, and the court wanted Malawians to follow exactly what was happening. So to me, that's a highlight. It brings in a new way in which you can adjudicate matters to ensure that the country is involved. But
did that not somehow influence the decision at the end of the day, or the judgment at the end of the day?
Maybe it did, because it allowed the court to kind of get to the bottom of the issue, to allow people to kind of explain, but also to allow people to be under cross-examination. You see, the advantage of cross-examination is that when a person is under pressure, that's when they can either show whether they're telling the truth, or whether they're lying, or whether they're trying to cover something. And it is in those moments that the court is able to see the truth. If you don't have cross-examination, sometimes people can say things that are not entirely true in a sworn affidavit. It's illegal. You're not supposed to do that. You can be charged with perjury, but we know that people do that. But under cross-examination, you can be challenged about what you say. So to me, that was good. But to me, the real highlight of this case is the judgment itself. The judgment itself. I mean, it's unprecedented. They start reading in the judgment at 9. They have 2 or 3 breaks, and then they finish around 8. I mean, where have you ever heard that? And the fact that they were so committed to ensure that they deliver this judgment, and that they deliver it within a day, because there was a moment in which the court pondered the thought of trying to deliver it the next day or continue delivering the next day. Can you imagine the suspense that would have been left in Malawians? Yeah. But the court, I think, realized that no. Let's get the Malawians out of their misery and let's deliver that. So to me, the judgment itself was the highlight. I mean, I personally listened to the judgment the whole time. And I think it's I would say it's the only time in my life where I have actually sat down and listened to anyone that long. Normally I'll be impatient and do something else. But I wanted to listen to make sure that I do not miss anything. So to me, I think that's the highlight.
50+1. It has been a contentious issue for quite a long time. We saw civil society organizations prior to the elections threatening to hold demonstrations, trying to force parliamentarians to pass a particular law to make sure that a president who is elected by the majority.
Yeah.
It was shot down in Parliament. During that particular judgment of the presidential election case, we saw the judges, one of the judges, Judge Hiliputa, saying, well, we're giving you parliamentarians 21 days to discuss this particular law and then pass it. So that when the election is being held again, we should use as a country this particular law. Tell us about the 50+1, first of all. Is it already in the Constitution? Is it not there? What is it about?
Okay. It's important, but before I start, let me just make a small comment about that parliament shut down. To me, that was quite strange. You have government bringing a bill in the House, and then it is being shut down by the same government MPs. To me, that taught me something about the whole bill. To be honest, I don't think that bill was brought in Parliament in earnest. It was never meant to pass. And I think as Malawians, that's not fair to us. So I think that's just my comment about that, the way those things happened. But coming back to this particular issue, I think it's important that we distinguish two things. The 50%+1 is the interpretation of the court of what majority means. That doesn't need to go to Parliament.
Okay.
Because according to our constitution, the courts are mandated to do that. Parliament passes the law, the statutory law, but Parliament cannot interpret it. The interpretation must be done by the courts. So this is what we must understand, and it's important that we go back to the Chakwamba case. When in 1994, the court interpreted it that, majority means the one who is ahead. Everyone accepted it. Why is it now contentious that the same court has said, no, we were wrong. 50%+1 means you must have a majority. Why are people surprised? It's the same court. The first time did it go to Parliament? No, it did not. But what the court said is the issues around it need to be resolved by Parliament. So what do I mean by the issues around it? So for example, let's say we have 4 contestants and they all have equally good followers. The chances are you may not have 50%+1. So if you have then someone, maybe the highest with 35, another with 30, another one with 15, or another one with 20, I'm just using these figures, then you'll find that what will happen is that no one will have 50%+1, meaning something else must be done. In other countries, you'd have what is called a runoff. And then the question is, the runoff between who? Between the top 3, the top 2, or all 4. And in most countries, usually it will be the top 2. So those are the things. And how long will the runoff take? How will the declarations be done? What happens in between? Who is in charge? So those are the things the court is saying Parliament needs to resolve. Not the 50%+1. The court has made a determination. It has interpreted it to say majority means this. And it's important for us to understand this. The law is already there. It's been there. The law says the president shall have a majority.
In the Constitution?
If you read the Constitution and the Parliamentary and Presidential Elections Act together, all the court is doing is interpreting it. In 1994, the court interpreted majority, and then we have got those acts coming. And all the court did was interpret it. Now, what the court is now saying is that interpretation was not correct. This is the correct interpretation. It has not changed what is already in the law. What is in the law is already there. What the court has done is change the meaning. And says, no. We did not fully look at all the provisions when we made that determination. It wasn't the specific judges, but this is the specific thing. So I think it's important for us to understand one thing. The declaration by the court that majority means 50%+1 is law. That's the way our law works. And I know people have said, no. The job of making law is up to Parliament. It's true. That's also true. But we have a common law system. And in the common law system, judges are allowed to fill in gaps in the law. So for example, in this particular case, Parliament just said majority. Parliament did not define majority in the Act. You get the point? So the courts now come in and interpret majority. And then say, majority means this. So when the courts are saying that, they're not really making law. They're interpreting it. But that interpretation is law.
Okay.
It's law from the day it was interpreted.
So if, in case parliamentarians decide to shoot it down,
What are they going to shoot down?
What will happen in that scenario? Is that possible?
What are they going to shoot down? Because that issue of 50% plus one is not going to be gone before Parliament. The court has already made an interpretation. The only way would be for Parliament to change the whole wording of the law, of the act, and use another word other than majority. And say, okay, the one who wins will be the one who has first past the post or something like that. And then that would be different. But the Parliament decided to use majority. And we must always say, when Parliament used the word majority, Parliament intended it to be majority.
Okay. So this means that now presidential elections will be held in this manner from now on going forward.
Yeah. And unless that interpretation is changed by the court.
Okay.
Or unless Parliament passes a completely new law which introduces a completely new regime of elections.
Are there any other such gaps in the Constitution?
Yes. There are always gaps.
Can you give us examples of other laws that don't work the way they're supposed to work?
No, they work the way they're supposed to. But Parliament gives definitions. So, for example, there was on the issue of quorum, for example, in the press trust case. There was the issue of quorum. If you recall the press trust case, I think it was decided by Justice Mwanguru then. And he made an interpretation of what quorum means. And at what point the quorum meant. Because there was some I would not say gaps in the parliamentary standing orders. But those are too clear. And of course the matter went to the Supreme Court and there was another definition. But I can't remember just off my head. But you see, there'll be, sometimes the law makes definitions that to you and me may not make sense. So I'll give you an example. Land, for example. Land may be defined as land includes land and everything on land. What does that say to you? You get my point? Yeah. It doesn't really say much. It means the court will have to interpret it in a particular case. Is this part of land? Or is it not part of land? So the law is usually made that deliberately. Because there's a danger. If you make full, complete interpretation of everything, then that doesn't give much room for maneuvering. Or it doesn't give room for new interpretation. You see, the law must always be dynamic. Even the law that was passed in 1929, the Penal Code, for example, must be interpreted in light of today. So if that law was very rigid, it would be very difficult to interpret it. But if the law is written usually in what we call broad terms as opposed to narrow terms, then the court will be able to interpret the current scenario into the old law. So the law is usually written that way for a purpose. It's for the law to be able to move forward.
Right. Let's look at the arguments that both sides presented in court during the particular case. The opposition, of course, won it. What were the strengths of their arguments? Where did they get it right?
Okay. I won't say the opposition got it right or won the case. No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
You see, this is public interest litigation. It's the public that won.
Okay, public won, yeah.
To say the truth, there are no winners or losers in that particular case. Because the court has essentially made a determination, clarified things, and essentially ensured that in future these are the way elections are to be heard. Remember what I said in Section 12? All power comes from the people.
Elected power.
The elected power comes from the people. And it must be exercised for their good. But now let's come back to the issues, the petitioners and respondents. I think both of them presented good cases. So the petitioner's case was essentially that you had a lot of irregularities. And that the irregularities essentially went to the heart of the declaring the election free and fair, or that the person who had been elected, in this case the president, was not duly elected. On the other hand, the thrust or the theory of the respondents was essentially that first they used an argument that we have to look at the quantitative analysis. That quantitatively, the numbers were not that much to change.
Did the irregularities impact the results? That was the argument.
Yes, but the first one, the theory about it was the numbers. That yes, there were irregularities. So whether there were irregularities or not was not even in contention. Both sides accepted it.
Yeah.
But the petitioners were saying it did. the respondents were saying, no, it did not. So they looked at the issues, they looked at the numbers, and that's why you saw that the Honorable Attorney General spent quite a lot of time going through the numbers, the figures, and the percentages, just to show that the percentages were small. So that was their first one. The other issue was about the issues of authority, that who has authority to make these declarations. And also the fact that some of the contested documents were actually signed for by the monitors. So it was like, why are you complaining when you did endorse these documents? So on the other side, the petitioner's main thrust was on an issue of qualitative. That if you look at everything in totality, it ends up by saying that the election was not free and fair, or at least the person who was elected was not duly elected. So that was the main issue, those two. And that's why they were presenting, if you listen carefully, you find that the petitioners presented evidence or witnesses who tried to show that from a qualitative perspective, there were problems and serious problems. The respondents essentially presented evidence to rebut that and to show that the numbers were not even that much. And even in cross-examination, that was very clear that they were hammering that they were not that much. And that, yes, they were irregularity, but they did not affect the election. In fact, or in other words, they did not go to the heart or the core of the election. So essentially, those were the two issues. That there were other issues which I would call minor issues. I would call minor issues because to me, whichever way those went did not really materially affect the decision of the court. So for example, whether it was the issue of the bribery, whether the issues of the monitors being refused to sign, those were also in quotations, but those were the issues that the petitions presented and of course the respondent rebutted. But to me, those were not the main issues on which the case was decided. I think the case was decided based on the big issues, to say, were there so many serious irregularities that we can say that this election was free and fair, or that the person who was declared, who's His Excellency the President, Professor Tarika, was duly elected? Or were there so many irregularities that we can say he was not duly elected? And to me, that was the main question that the court had to answer.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about now a recent decision that has been made by President Peter Mutharika. It has just been confirmed by the Presidential Press Secretary, Mr. Mgeme Karen, that he will appeal against the decision by the Constitutional Court. Can you appeal a decision made by the Constitutional Court? Let's begin from there.
In Malawi?
Yeah.
Yes, because the Constitutional Court in Malawi is a high court.
Okay, fine.
And according to our legal structure, the highest court in Malawi is the Malawi Supreme Court of Appeal. Okay. So decisions of the High Court are appealable to the Supreme Court on matters like this. There is, of course, an issue about whether you can appeal a petition that has been brought by... So this petition was brought under Section 100 of the Parliamentary and Presidential Elections Act. That is different from another section, which is Section 114 of the same Act, where if you bring it under that particular section, the law says the decision of the High Court is final. You cannot appeal it.
Under Section 100.
104.
104.
And that was the case that was in Mangochi, in which the court, I think it was Justice Kalembera, ruled that you must have a fresh election. And the Malaya Electoral Commission, I know, they indicated that they were going to appeal, but there was that challenge that the law says you cannot appeal. Of course, whether that law can withstand the constitutional challenge is something else. Personally, I think you can appeal, but you would have first to go to court and ensure that that provision is made unconstitutional. So that would have to be done first. But that aside, coming back to the question that you've asked, yes, the president, because he was named as the first respondent.
Yeah.
And I do recall people here says, why are they naming the president? You can imagine if the president was not the first respondent, or he didn't want to become a first respondent. What would have happened now? You would have no avenue to challenge this decision. So to me, it was good that he was the first respondent, because now it gives him an opportunity to go to the higher court and get the decision of the higher court. Whether What will happen next, I should say, will depend on what the grounds of appeal are and what the Supreme Court says. But since I haven't seen the grounds of appeal, it's difficult for me to comment.
Yeah. So there'll be more arguments. So the Supreme Court will just be judges sitting down and looking at that.
No, there'll be arguments. The appellant will have to present arguments.
Their case.
Why they think the lower court, which would be now the High Court or the Constitutional Court, as we fondly call it, made mistakes. So they would be appealing, and obviously the other side, who are the applicants, most likely would also respond, and they're essentially arguing that no, the decision of the High Court was actually correct.
If you're just joining us, welcome. This is Times Exclusive right here on Times TV. My name is Elvis Hohoa. I'm joined in the program by Dr. Sunduzwayo Madise, a law lecturer at the Chancellor College, discussing the presidential election case judgment.
I love brilliant green on my walls. I love signal red, sweet lime, electric blue. I just love golden yellow.
You get all that and more at Rainbow Paints. Imagine a water-based paint that is water-resistant. Imagine a paint that is absolutely washable to remove dirt. And it guarantees you 10,000 cleaning scrubs over its lifespan without losing its luster. There can only be one paint that does just that, and that paint is acrylic sheen. Get yours today at all leading hardware stores. Rainbow Paints. Peace of mind. Part of the deal.
Let's proceed with our conversation and talk about the impact that this will have on Malawi's democracy. I know you've studied a lot of law, but you understand issues of democracy as well. What sort of impact do you think this case is going to have on Malawi's democracy?
Oh, it's going to have a huge impact. But maybe the question should be, when the people who kind of framed, when in 1993 or from 1989, people were agitating for multi-party democracy, what did they really want? So we may say an impact, maybe because we may have gone on a wrong trajectory. Maybe it's a way of correcting it. But whichever way, yeah, it's going to have a huge impact. Why am I saying it's going to have a huge impact? Now, I'm not a political scientist. But I can offer an opinion, which is not an expert opinion. But my opinion would be the decision of the court on 50% plus one now means you are not going to have a minority president. You cannot have a president who was just in front, but who did not get a majority. In my view, that is good. We want a president, in my view, who can command a majority support of the country. And to me, it also helps that particular person to govern properly. Because if majority of the electorate, of the people, trust this particular person, then they give him the mandate to govern. And the president can essentially enjoy that mandate. So that is my opinion. And I've heard people say, oh, this is not going to be possible. It's going to be costly. We'll have a lot of re-elections. Yeah, we may have. But maybe it will also be a chance to weed out pretenders. You see, in Malawi, we have elections where you have more than 10 political candidates for president. I mean, that's a joke. They were just wasting our time. They're wasting their own time. They're wasting the time of the Electoral Commission. I'm not saying people should not have a chance to stand, but you must be able to gauge yourself. You must be able to do a little bit of survey to say, do I have what it takes? So to me, this will kind of narrow the field. I hope it will narrow the field and have only people who are serious contenders to vie for the presidency. And to me, that can be good. Whether the reruns are good for our economy or not, democracy has never been cheap. The moment we decided to have multi-party democracy every 5 years, we made a decision that we're going to fund this. This is not cheap. So we cannot have it both ways. As they say, you can't have your cake and eat it as well. We cannot say we want democracy in its fullness and at the same time complain when democracy says this is what I demand. So in my view, it is good that this has been cleared this way. And in my view, I think we need to have a president who commands the majority. I think, to me, it just makes common sense. It is better for the person who is president, but it also is better for the country.
The Malawi Electoral Commission wasn't given a lot of credit by the judges when they're passing their judgment.
I think you're being generous.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
You're being generous.
I'm being generous.
Yeah, I think to say the truth, the court bashed the Electoral Commission.
Yeah. Do you think that was fair?
Yes. Yes. I mean, they were saying it on the basis of evidence that they received. Look, for example, the issue about the commission not taking, I think, the proceedings seriously. I think that is true. Because if none of the commissioners saw an affidavit, did not appear in court, and then they send their employees, what does that say about the commission? Because the employees they sent Mr. Alufadiga and his colleague are not the commission. The commission are the commissioners. So the least they could have done was swear an affidavit, especially on the contentious issues. But not only that, look, I saw on TV, I watched on TV, I think it was on Zodiac TV if I'm not wrong, where the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Justice Jena Ansah, my bad, was asked, I think by Mr. Chakaza, if I'm not mistaken, whether they had received TPEX results. And her response was, yes, we did. And then he asked a follow-up question, whether they had used those TPEX results to tabulate the final tally. And she said, yes. And I shook my head. Would you go and represent a TPEX check to a bank? Would they pay it to you?
No, they wouldn't.
Would you go and present any TPEX document, official document? Would it be accepted?
No,
it wouldn't be accepted. So to me, the fact that they did that showed that something had gone wrong. Now, this is the point, and this is what must be clarified. TPEXing something doesn't mean you falsified anything. You could actually have made a mistake. But to me, they needed to find ways, because they should have known that people can make mistakes. So they should have found ways. So if people make mistakes, what do we have? So they should have had either duplicate, or they should have had spare sheets, which can be used at the tally center. At the end, they can account for them. And then everyone is happy. In the same way, you make a mistake, you don't TPEX, you cancel, you write something different. So to me, that was not correct. So the court, I think, is entitled to make its pronouncements on how they looked at the conduct of the Electoral Commission in the whole thing, and that the irregularities were not small. They are serious, but they were also sprayed across the country. So let's be honest. What that actually said was incompetence. The Electoral Commission was incompetent. And if people are incompetent, we must stop trying to sugarcoat it. Say it. They were incompetent in the way they dealt with the election. And I think the court just did that. And yeah, you could say they were bashed, and you could say one of them is a fellow judge. But that's what courts do. Courts are like you and me. You and me who try to be nice to each other. Courts don't have time to do that. They'll call a spade as the way they say it.
Now, what will happen to the Malawi Electoral Commission? Because there have been calls for Dr. Jenance's head. That people, some stakeholders wanted it to go. Civil society organizations, opposition political parties. Now, following this judgment, will the same MEG be there, or there will be a new one? Interpret that for the viewers.
In terms of the way things happen, you see, that's the other thing the judges say needs to be clarified. Because if you go and check the Constitution, the Constitution talks about the chairperson of the Electoral Commission shall be nominated by essentially the judiciary. But it doesn't say who's going to appoint her. See, that's another gap. Now, what has traditionally, what we have taken is that the gap must be filled by the president. Say, it shall be the president that shall appoint. And this has happened. And no one has really complained. And the court didn't really say that should not happen. But the court made it clear that, let's be clear. Will it be the court president, sorry, or will it be parliament? So the court just said, let's clarify this. Because in other countries, the person may be nominated and parliament confirms. It doesn't have to be the president. So those powers need to be clarified. The president usually appoints the commissioners, and the commissioners have a term of office. Ordinarily, you'd expect that the commissioner would continue until they do the election. I would say ordinarily. The reason is because this is not an ordinary situation. Like I said, the irregularities, were so glaring that it now brings to question whether Malawians can trust the same commissioners to continue being commissioners of the Electoral Commission. Can Malawians, in earnest, trust that this same commission that made so many mistakes can actually redeem itself and deliver a good and fair election, which is credible? The court was clear. It doesn't mean there will be no mistakes. There will always be irregularities. There will always be. But they must be as such that people can quickly dismiss them to say, now something happened, but it didn't affect the election. I think this Electoral Commission, in my own personal view, has been heavily compromised. That I think it's not tenable anymore for them to continue. But those are individual choices. The chairperson is in an untenable position. She was on TV saying, the court will vindicate me, or the legal process will vindicate me. It has not. In fact, it has condemned her. So she said, it will vindicate me, and meaning that it will show that what she did was correct, or what the commission did was correct. Actually, it's the opposite. The court has said, no, what you did wasn't correct. Does that mean she should resign? It's up to her. My own view is that those positions, her position as well as the positions of the others, are untenable. But it's up to the appointing authorities and the nominating authorities to find out the way forward. And there are also challenges, operational challenges. For example, if you take out the whole commission, do we have enough time to train new commissioners that in 148, 49 days, counting down, they can be able to deliver an election? Because you need a little bit of expertise. So those are the challenges that we may have about bringing in new people. But yeah, I think with the way the court pronounced, with what has happened, it becomes problematic. But yeah, the Electoral Commission could decide to redeem itself and deliver a free and fair election.
Did the public in any way influence the judgment on the 3rd of February? In your opinion?
In my opinion, I would say yes and no. I would say yes and no because I would say that courts make decisions based on the evidence before them. And that's the way they primarily will make decisions, the evidence before them. But you see, you and I know very well that these judges, all judges, live with us. Can we say that the judges were oblivious to the fact that there was discontent? I don't think so. I think they knew. There were also other issues around what was happening. So I would say that influenced the judges. But I would say it would be naive for us to pretend that it was never at the back of the judge's mind. You know, something that just tells you that something is not really okay here. Because they're human beings. It's what when we're teaching law, we say judicial realism. That these are human beings like us. The fact that they're judges doesn't mean all of a sudden they're living in another planet. They are living in the same planet like you and me. So it would be, I think, naive for me just to dismiss it, to say, oh, they didn't care about what the public. No. But I would say that the decision itself was made based on the evidence.
Now, we understand that, you correct me if I'm mistaken, in law, when you're passing judgment, you refer to some cases that happened before.
Yeah.
You have a term that you use.
Judicial precedent.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much was this used during this particular moment?
It was quite extensive, because you see, we had specific provisions in the Constitution and in the Presidential and Parliamentary Elections Act, and this is the point I'm trying to drive. Those provisions are written, and usually they're written in words that are not usually too clear sometimes. Now, you need someone to kind of give meat to that interpretation, and they do that normally by looking at what have other courts said in similar circumstances. So even on issue of majority, the court made references to what other people have said, what other courts have said, what other people have written on that particular issue. So even, for example, when they were looking at it, they referred to the book that has been written by Professor Donald Jira to say, what do others think about these particular provisions? So, yes, judicial precedent, case law was used quite extensively in that particular case to help, for example, in interpretation of certain words, interpretation of certain phrases and certain meanings. So, for example, there was also another issue about whether it should be quantitative and qualitative. And they would look at that, and whether people who saw affidavits should all have come to court. And the court looked around and said, what have other countries said about this particular case? But of course, the court came to its own conclusion. So, yes, the court did use that. But much more, the court used the evidence that was before it.
Okay.
So, the way you apply it in law is this. You use the law to apply it on the facts. And if you use the law to apply it on the facts, then you get a result. So, the facts speak for themselves. The evidence speaks for itself. But then you look at the evidence and say, what does the law say when this has happened? This is what the law says. Has this happened? Yes, it has happened. This is what we'll find. Or has this not happened? Then we will not find it that way. So that decision is usually not a mixture, but something that has considered what the law is saying on the particular subject and what the facts are on the subjects and what the evidence has revealed. So I would say that that must be looked in totality.
Right. Now, over the days, over the weeks, a lot of questions were hanging over the judiciary's head in terms of in relation to whether it is independent, whether it is not influenced by other circumstances. I don't want to talk about it because probably the matter is still in court. The way how some decisions were made. How much do you think this case alone has vindicated Malawi's judiciary? How much has it shown its independence in as far as handling matters or making decisions is concerned?
Oh, I think massively. Massively, because you're right. There have been times it's been reported in the papers, and you can't pretend where the judiciary has been bashed. Of course, some of us would think unfairly, but people have a right to express an opinion, and if they're not happy with the decision of the courts, they have a right to say that. So, yeah, there have been cases where sometimes some of the decisions made by some courts have come under heavy scrutiny. Not just by the public per se, but even amongst the legal profession, where people have wondered, how did this happen, or how could this happen? But fundamentally, we must accept that the courts make decisions based on the evidence before them. And the principle of law is that if you're not happy, you appeal. If you're not happy, you appeal. You don't go in the press or in the papers or in the public and start shouting or discrediting the jury or discrediting the courts, because you need them. But coming back to your question, yes, this case has demonstrated. I think the Malawi judiciary is already respected highly in the world. It's independent, it's professional, and that this judgment is solid. But I think this particular case, because of what it has attracted, the world orientation has attracted, it has shown how independent it is. And let's not hide. It shows us a lot of braveness. We must commend those particular judicial officers. It's not easy to nullify an election. Most of us would have maybe taken an easier route and says, look, let's just go continue. We'll resolve it next time. Let's not stir up the waters. But these particular judicial officers of this particular court said, no, we will not allow this to happen on our watch. No, we will not do it. So it was a lot of courage on their part. There was a lot of bravery on their part. But we must also commend the counsel for the petitions and the respondents, as well as the amicus. They all did their part and they all did a great job. So I would say, yeah, it has definitely been a massive endorsement of our judiciary.
Any last comments on this particular matter, Dr. Madise?
Yes, I think people need to make a distinction between what the court said and what are opinions of people. Some of the things some of us say are opinions, but there's things that were stated by the court, and those are not debatable in terms of whether they are law or not law. They're not debatable. What we can debate is whether the decision we think was right or not right. And we're entitled to do that. But we cannot start saying, oh, no, that should not be. There was another one that I wanted to say that people have said, oh, the Supreme Court say that majority means the one who's ahead. And therefore this court, because it has said majority means the one with 50% plus one, you have two different decisions. Therefore, which one do we pick? No. The court has made a decision. You are not happy with this decision, go to the Supreme Court and appeal. The court has made a decision. What the court has said is that the Supreme Court made an error or wrongfully interpreted the law. And people are saying, oh, does that mean the Supreme Court, the High Court has overruled the Supreme Court? No, it hasn't. This is about interpretation. It's not about a finding of fact. So the court hasn't found ABCD, which is different from the Supreme Court. No. Or the court hasn't changed the principle of a certain principle of law, which is different. All the court has said is the Supreme Court, in the court's view, did not consider the legal definition of majority in an election. And the court said it believes that if the Supreme Court in the Chakwamba case had considered that definition, then it would have come at a different conclusion. And the court said, this is what we find. So to me, ideally, there's not so much inconsistency. Unless if the matter goes to the Supreme Court and then the Supreme Court still upholds its decision in Chakwamba, then that would be the case.
Is there a time to educate people, inform people about the change, the 50 plus 1?
Yeah.
Will people embrace it? Will people say, okay, we can go for a second round? Nobody got a majority. No presidential candidate got a majority. Is there time?
Yeah, we have time. 150 days, that's 3 months. But you need organizations like NICE, organizations like media houses. We need to educate the people. But this is the question. Is this really strange? How about we all had elections where there is a tie and we say, oh, we have a tie, can we have a second round? Is that really surprising? I don't think so. I don't think we should underestimate the intellectual power of Malawians to grasp this. I think Malawians fully understand what this means. They fully understand it. So I think there is time. And there is a lot of time.
All right. Yeah. Dr. Madise, thank you very much for
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Right. And that's all we had for you in today's edition of Times Exclusive with me, Elvis Soho. And in the program, we were joined by Dr. Sunduzwayo Madise, a law lecturer at the Chancellor College, discussing the presidential election case judgment. See you next week.